Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network, and this is a long time coming. So this episode is the last in Faith's first series of work culture design. And today, we're going to be talking about what she's got coming for you next year. So if you have not watched any of these episodes, I will link them down in the show notes. And I have insanity going above my head. No one can hear it but me, of course, but it's insanity, mayhem, pandemonium. Okay. So we spent a lot of time talking about the ways that we can build better workplace culture. And to lead into that, Faith, tell us a little bit about what you're doing next year and how it's going to change work.
Hi, Briar. Thank you. As you talked about the chaos all around, that feels like a metaphor for what we're all living, right? There's the external chaos and all of what's going on in the world. There's the internal stuff, and then there's the stuff happening at work, and that's pretty dynamic. So, like whatever tools you're using at home, you probably need to use it at work. So restorative work culture has been the thing I've been playing with. Like, how do we create work that does not extract from us? How do we create work that feels that we don't have to recover from? That's the premise of designing a work culture that's restorative. And so as I work with clients, part of what I'm listening for is where are the questions where people get stuck. And the reality is, Briar, that so much of what we do is in this automatic autopilot play in our brains, in an Excel spreadsheet, and in the places that we don't even know how to separate the patriarchal, supremacist, harmful structures from our day-to-day practice. We don't know how to facilitate employee behavior change without some form of punishment or reward type of system. We don't know how to deal with conflict without some kind of, up the ante system so that we must go to legal and HR, right? So fundamentally, we don't have business systems that are restorative. So this means that we're going to have to figure it out. So what I've been trying to do is listening for some of the key questions or some of the key blocks that people have. And I've designed a 6-part masterclass for January through June, which basically will introduce people managers, HR leaders, executives to some of the fundamental thought and give them some worksheets that they can start to do some deconstructing and some practice with their organization. Just like, how would we do this? It's not possible in a masterclass series for them to know enough to fully implement. But basically, I'm going to do theory and then worksheets so that they at least, when a practitioner comes around, they have really specific questions. Organizations are lean. They have no time for the exploratory work that a consultant like me would have to do just to figure out where the problem is. With my clients, I spend a month to 2 months just talking to people, excavating, tossing all the rubbish out onto the ground to be able to say, oh, here's where we should start. And so a masterclass like this will help people to begin some excavation, some auditing of their own, and then help them say, okay, here's where we have a lot of questions. Here's where we might want to implement something. And then that means that just a more economical and efficient process for everybody overall, if they're interested in work not harming their people.
And so I think that one of the first places we start is at the beginning, right? When we hire folks.
Yeah.
How are you observing problems happening from the very beginning?
Yeah. So if we think about restorative work, for me, restorative, that the whole connection to an ecosystem that feels vibrant, that feels like there is a good exchange of give and take. That kind of juiciness is what we want to happen when we've hired a person. What most people's onboarding systems do is focus on tech and tools. And we're going to give you the logins. We're going to make sure that you have access one more Google login to put in with your, and you need to be paid. So we're going to run you through the whole bunch of things at payroll, compliance, wait, your ethic. So there is this list of things that perhaps organizations, corporations feel legally they want to do. And this time period within which a new hire is craving integration into the whole. We don't know that that's what we're craving. We just want to go in and you want to do a good job. At least 50% of people say that their onboarding was not effective. And at least 50% of people leave the job within 2 months of their hire. So I feel like there's something there, yet everybody's onboarding. So I feel like if we can switch this idea from let's do tech tools to let's connect to work community, then that will at least set the stage for something that feels more restorative. People want to feel like they have something to contribute. That's why your job was great and all, and you're going to pay them hopefully good money. They want a value of contribution. And most people feel that at the end of onboarding, they don't know their job well enough to feel like they can be effective in their contribution. So there is a rejiggering needed, a rethought as to what are some of the connections to work community that would help this person begin this process of integration. There's a need to change the thought process to not 2 weeks, 1 week, or whatever, but a period that's more 6 months. All of the data says it's 6 months to a year to be connected. And because we're doing this 1 week, 2 week situation, employees aren't lasting the 6 months to a year
right.
to become properly connected.
If it takes me 6 months to be connected and the average employee is leaving 2 months in, it's obvious we're never going to be connected. So
especially because that's not our intention. So people are trying to become connected all on their own. They're figuring it out, and you're depending on good other employees to take them under their wing. And even organizations that have a buddy system, there is no space in the work schedule to effectively mentor and support a new hire. So you set up a buddy system, but it's like every person for themselves until we meet up at lunch. We kind of grab a coffee afterwards. We talk about, versus an intentional connection and movement through a system that then helps people to understand who's who, what's what, where do they fit, and how they can be effective.
Which I think leads us very nicely into the second workshop, which is better leadership practices, right? All of this comes from leadership.
Absolutely. And I think, when we think leadership, I have a colleague who says you have the big L leader and the small L leader. They are the people with the titles, but anybody in your space that has influence is a leader, right? So it's about thinking through what happens when we put on the mantle of leadership, similar to what happens when we put on the mantle of parenting. I knew, for example, that I was going to get to tell people what to do, and they would do it, and then the children started having their own opinions and refusing to do what I said. So we have these ideas about what leadership means, and we are not necessarily aware that we're implementing ideas that were handed to us from systems that were built on commoditizing human labor, creating a hierarchy of human value, and making sure people knew where in the hierarchy they were. So we reinforce those systems in our leadership, and when we are challenged, we have no idea what to do. I remember I'm going to go back to the parenting analogy, because you know about the like gentle discipline and all these kinds of things. And you're like, so he's doing this thing though. How do I stop it? Right. And lots of leaders are saying, yeah, Faith, this is fine. But the report was due. I spoke and it didn't happen. How do I stop it? Right. And so the need for us to challenge our foundational approach to influencing human behavior, to guiding and supporting and managing people, super important.
And part of this is your third class, which is time management, right? The ways in which we're connecting and interacting together.
I'm just trying to get the title of my third class that I can get it because no more time. The third class, I was being a little bit facetious. No more time wasting trainings. Yeah, it's time management, but you know what, Briar? It's time utilization. What we
Right.
do in the typical organization is that we have a bunch of things that are on a checklist and they take up time. This is the currency we use. So we do them, but they're completely ineffective in just making people feel more healthy, more connected, included like they belong. And so training is one of them. I'm with a client right now, and all of my sessions with the people are mandated, and they come in looking like they're like, they don't want to be there. I remember doing a training in an academic setting, and the minute the clock went to 5 minutes before the time that they were paid to be in there, everybody levitated out of their seats, right? So employees don't want to be in these trainings that are not effective. They know they're not effective. Corporations are spending tons of money on these trainings. Employees want to be trained to be effective. It's an interesting dichotomy. They're saying, I want to know the things I want to know. And so this is a really missed opportunity. And fundamentally, like in the educational system, we have designed training to not fit humans. We basically aren't accessing what we know about how people learn. People learn experientially, people learn through stories, people learn through relationships. Back to my old mentoring and connection business. If we reframe this idea of training, so we're not sitting down watching a Zoom video, clicking through slides, but actually kind of immersing people into context and helping them navigate and think innovatively and enhance their divergent thinking. There's all kinds of really effective things we know. So I am kind of in that topic, I am elevating the primary purveyor of our supremacist thinking, which is the educational system, showing how those elements are at work in the workplace and asking people to design something new, offering them some suggestions as to how to do it.
So if you come to all 6 of these workshops, you're going to spend the first quarter of the year, January, February, March, talking about how people learn, what's going to be effective for them, and how to make leadership happen organically.
Yeah.
So that people are truly integrating into the workplace, which is absolutely valuable. I know so many leaders who go through hires so rapidly because they can't create the culture that they are looking for.
Yeah, and then there's the thing that employees have done last year. I think, what was it? The rage applications. That so something happened that you sick of it, and then send out applications to 30 people, and then there's so many people who need, then they get hired. There's so much reaction to the way things are right now in the system that's destabilizing it. If we could get how to connect people, help them feel like they matter, support, influence them in really nourishing ways, and then build our organization's capacity to help them learn whatever it is that we think they should be learning, like boom, we've done so much more than we've addressed so many, or we've begun to address so many of the pain points in the modern organization.
Which leads us very nicely to April, where we start talking about the micro practices. So tell me what you mean.
Yeah. So, Brian, one of the things that I've noticed is that there's a lot of agreement in terms of what people want to see happen. No one wants to be racist. Nobody wants to be expressed in microaggressions. Nobody wants to be insensitive. Nobody wants to be domineering and dictatorial, right? So people give lip service and even like bringing access to these ideas. But we have the fast thinking, slow thinking system, right? So that the slow thinking system has the agreements, the fast system thinking has the, in our brains, the fast system thinking has the stuff we already know, the habits, the instincts. So micro practices are these tiny behaviors that we don't think about. The recoil, either physically or internally, when something happens or somebody says something that we don't know or like. And so part of what I like to help people notice is to kind of slow moments down and notice how they are processing a particular moment, expand that out so people can see what are my micro behaviors when particular things happen, when there's conflict on the team, when there's a conversation about
I am recording. Figure it out.
When there's a conflict about either a work thing or an emotional or, relationship piece at work, whatever those things are, let's blow it up and let's look at some of the things that you're actually doing. When we do that and we know what the do you want to do, tell me what you want to do, because I'm hearing the yelling. How do you want to do? Do you want to pause and they stop the yelling?
You should not be hearing the yelling, which means we're on the wrong camera. Oh my goodness.
I'm hearing the yelling, but it's also it's just so much real life, Briar. Sounds like they've calmed down.
There. Did that fix it at all?
I'm hearing a little.
No.
That. How about that? Maybe that got it.
I don't hear anything else.
Fabulous. I have no idea what today's pandemonium is.
Anyway, what was I saying? Right. So for practices, yeah. So I think that there are basic small things that we do in terms of listening and some of our listening behaviors and how we attend, how we then notice difference, what we do when we see the differences, how we connect those differences to our own identities. There are a bunch of tiny things that we do. It could be down to breathing and getting ourselves agitated versus not. So when I'm working with a team on the micro practices, I'm usually saying, what are some of the very small steps that will take you from this point to the point that you want to be at in terms of your restorative teamwork or your restorative conflict navigation or whatever it is. So sometimes it's something as simple as a pause. In a meeting, everything is going on, and then something happens, and I'm encouraging let's take a pause. And then how do we indicate that on our team in language that we all agree? So what's our code word for this pause? We insert that into the meeting. What are the behaviors of the leaders of this meeting to give space for that code word and then get the pause going? What happens then when somebody says, hey, I want to introduce this new topic that I was annoyed about, which is why I called pause. And some of that, it feels a little bit artificial, but it really is us learning something new that's not the instinctive thing that we've done. So
we're learning new things, which is what we're doing in May. We're learning conflict navigation practices. Tell us more about what you mean.
I hinted at that just in this example here. One of the biggest, outcomes of a workplace that isn't restorative is ineffective or harmful ways that we handle conflict. So conflict is just going to happen. People are different from each other, and we're going to kind of rub up on each other, and there's going to be that. But because, again, value hierarchy, all the things, conflict comes with fear of retribution and recrimination. Conflict comes with this thought that, wait, if I lose my job, the moment an employee in the face of conflict has to say, if I lose my job, there is no healthy conflict navigation. There's avoid or, whatever other thing that's going on. So a lot of what's happening in at work that's working against effective decision making and creative thinking, which is right on the edge of conflict. You see that difference? The both, and when we can actually move through, there's something novel to be created there that's to the benefit of the organization. But we can't get there because people are backing away, because to engage conflict means to risk so much. So when I talk about restorative conflict navigation, I'm talking about embracing conflict. I actually am suspicious when I'm with teams that they're like, no, there's no. I'm like, people are lying, people are disengaged. The engaged people who are not lying are talking about all the things, and things are coming up and they're discussing them. And it's a wealth that the organization loses. We can't, things are too skinny right now. We can't afford to be losing all this value because people can't navigate conflict. So figuring out conflict navigation practices that honor individual difference and that integrate into a new whole. Our brains aren't used to doing that at work. We probably do it at home sometimes, but we're not used to do that at work. And talking through how to implement an approach that both honors and integrates, honors difference, integrates into the whole, as part of the actual specific work that has to happen within the context of time constraints. Some things have to happen now. So we need some practices that help us to be able to handle that now, to do it, and then come back to the emotional conflict, to trust each other, all those things. We need to build the capacity for the restorative conflict through some behaviors that build trust and so on.
Conflict about a snack, I believe. And it's part of navigating the process, right? Like, I think people are afraid of conflict, and so they just don't allow it to happen at all.
I think they're also afraid of how it feels. Like, for example, you are in the conflict, or you're not in the conflict, but you're hearing the conflict and you're feeling a little elevated. You're feeling a little agitated. Maybe your neck and your shoulder get tight. We're so disembodied. And maybe our ancestors worked in ways that engage their bodies fully, but we're so disembodied that everything that happens in our body can feel uncomfortable. And then we are so scared of feeling that discomfort that we clamp down and we tighten up. A colleague of mine commented that it's always easier when you're falling to go with the fall than to resist. And so much of conflict, what's happening is that there's difference and people are afraid of how that feels. And so they're resisting it, and then that creates all this versus leaning into it and following the journey that the conflict could create.
Okay, so once we've learned about our culture and we've learned about how to work with people through conflict management, through time management, and through micro practices, we're going to wrap it all up, Faith, with a bow, and talk about inclusion. Tell us, first of all, specifically what you mean when you're talking about inclusion.
Yeah. I'm being a tiny bit facetious to put inclusion at the end, because for the whole thing, I'm talking about inclusion, right? And inclusion for me, I've taken a hybrid of Claude Steele, a social psychologist, his definition, that the state of being included is that state of feeling like you belong and that you can thrive. That's that sweet spot of it's belonging, it's gratitude for belonging, because sometimes we believe we belong, but you're just like, I wish I didn't, So it's belonging, it's gratitude for belonging, and that feeling that you can thrive in this space. That's a state of being included. And if part of what we have to acknowledge is that we can't include everyone in this kind of white supremacist ideology, where the appearance of being right is important. Part of what happens in so much of this work around changing the way work happens and well-being and all this good stuff is that people feel they need to have a formula that they are going to implement completely and make this right? So they're going to do this perfectly. So then they say, okay, we're not diverse. The team is too whatever demographic. Let's get some Black people. Actually, let's get some Black women. And they haven't done the due diligence to figure out what's the gap between them, the system that they have, and this Black woman is coming in, Faith is coming in to go do some people and culture work. They haven't figured that out yet. And so in essence, they brought me into a space where I cannot be included. And this assumption that we can include just by choice it's failing the system. And so many people of multiple marginalized identities step into spaces on promises, and then the harm that's done, because when you realize, oh, people, your first thought isn't that people can't do it, it's that people won't do it. And so the perpetuation of the harm and of the mistrust is what happens when people don't prepare to be inclusive and don't figure out where the gaps are. And so in that session, I'm going to talk about the accessibility gap. Yeah, there are accessibility gaps in terms of, technology and tools. But in my definition, the accessibility gap is that space between where the system ends and the person begins. Because back to my first point, person needs to be connected and integrated into the system. So like, what's that gap? Because if we make that gap be something that the person has to traverse on their own, it's not going to happen. It's too much effort, too much labor for it to happen consistently enough for the person to feel like they belong and like they can thrive. So we have to own, if I decide I want to include people with autism in my workplace, I need to own the sensory gap, the accommodation gap, some kind of emotional support gap. Funnily enough, my daughter was watching one of these, X Factor or something. And everybody, after they finish performing, especially if they've done well, they cry. Stand on stage and they're so comfortable, they're crying, and people are telling them good things and they're trying to keep it together. And my daughter said, where's the emotional support person? Like they should know that this is what's going to happen.
Should.
And that person should be around the stage. Like, watch people cry on X Factor enough times, right? And I just thought there is a knowing that we need to have about the space where our system ends and particular demographics that we want to include come in. We should be interrogating that gap all the time and then honestly answering whether we can invite people into that space if we're willing to put resources and support and all the stuff in place to help people bridge that gap.
Okay. It sounds amazing.
I think we're going to have lots of fun.
I think we're going to have lots of fun. So, first of all, we'll leave the link in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
It's Luma, lu.ma/restorative.
Mm-hmm.
What's this experience going to be like for people? Because this is not like a normal training. It's a faith training.
It could be anything. I don't want to say that out loud. It could be anything because then people won't buy the tickets. No, but the thing is that depending on the topic, I probably have some body orientation or activity or exercise or some kind of divergent thinking, tiny craft or something, because I do want people, even though we're talking about this topic, I want them to sit in the skin of their employees and staff and understand what's needed to help people engage with their lives, right? And so it does involve some kind of sometimes activation of the body and sometimes calming of the body. So there'll probably be some stuff like that. There's probably going to be a bunch of storytelling and a lot of my invitation to them to tell stories. But because I'm recording it, I'm going to do a little bit more of a conventional approach, probably 10-minute blocks where I'm talking about a thing. And then we'll spend half an hour just like working it out. And then for at least a third of the time, we'll have breakout rooms practices where they're in workshops or whatever. When I say breakout rooms, no, that's Zoom jargon, but we will have small group practice where they're now deconstructing whatever it is that they've been talking about, using the worksheet, talking about their actual specific situation, and then they're gonna like work it out with each other. And then for a couple of people, there'll be a hot seat. Assuming that it goes well, and meaning people move through, they talk about it, they'll come back back with clearer questions, and I'll take a couple of people and we'll just process out loud my initial thoughts and application for them in their work situation. I tend to be the risk that I hear in my own expression just now is that I tend to have a lot to say. So, I am trying to constrain myself that it's really not about broad content. It really is about specific application so that I can kind of just focus it in and give people a chance to take something in, apply it to their context, get my thoughts on that. And then afterwards, if they need more, we can do that.
And who are these workshops best suited for?
Overall, I think, first of all, small business, they can be corporations, but I am focusing in on the organization that's under 100 employees, anywhere from that 10 to 100 range. There's an agility that size organization has to implement, not necessarily meeting upon as much bureaucracy as the larger organizations do. And so I'm focusing on those. I love nonprofits because in the nonprofit space, they are explicitly about changing the world, and I can use that against them because the principles that they use to change the world, they are not usually applying inside their own house, and so there's an opportunity there to really mine that. So under 100 people, a nonprofit, or explicitly about the business of making this world better than when we got here. In addition to that's founders, CEOs, and those people. In large organizational space, HR directors and/or people and learning and development type people would be good candidates because they tend to be the curators of the content that's around this topic, and they're persistently faced with some of these implementation questions. C-suite and executive level people are implementing, and then they're like, oh, such manager needs training, and then they send them into this context. So I do want them to be a little bit more discerning about what's needed to create the shift and maybe what pieces of content people need. A general workshop on what are microaggressions, I find it completely wasteful. What's implicit bias? So I think that there's a discernment that we need to kind of really move this needle forward. And so that's my hope with those people.
Okay, final thoughts for us, my friend. What do you hope people take away from this series?
I saw, who was she? Maybe afterwards I'll find her and put it in the show notes. I saw one of these Black CEOs talking in an interview in an Instagram clip, talking about the years and years and years she spent changing herself within work contexts and changing all the various versions of herself, trying to become more whatever so she could be happy. And she basically just challenged, is like, no, I know that I must change my context, not myself. And that the work is to fiercely become the self you're supposed to be and navigate change in the context. And if we actually change the context, what we're doing is creating pushback in the system to say, hey, that context sucks. It doesn't work for me. This context sucks. It doesn't work for me. And so what I want people to leave the series with is the commitment to influencing their context so that their best self could actually thrive, and also holding that parallel to their commitment to fiercely protecting themselves. Because if we believe that we can change ourselves just to fit the context, we will believe that our employees should be doing that too. And then we'll judge them as lazy, lacking ambition, and all these kinds of things when they're not being productive because the context is ineffective for them. So I think every single leader needs to fiercely be protecting themselves and their own true essence in the workplace. They must be committed to being human in the workplace, and then committed to creating spaces where everybody can be human. That's the only way it's going to work, because when the rubber hits the road, we just go back to,
Yes.
Yeah.
We go back to what we know. So if we don't know another way, we're never going to be able to fix these things.
That's right. Work starts with the self. It absolutely starts. Yeah, I'm talking about onboarding, but I'm talking about the self and what do I need to feel deeply connected? And when we can own those cravings for ourselves, then we have capacity to own them for the people we're bringing into our organizations. The moment we are not willing to own our own human cravings for deep connection, belonging, and meaningful work and inclusion, then it just becomes another thing that we're checking off on the box, which means that we're going to pretend, we're going to cook the books. we're going to do it superficially. So,
and I think what everyone wants, and the whole purpose of this series and so many of the things that we're talking about here at the network, is making work better.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
All right.
We have to heal our relationship to work.
Yes. So if that is something that seems meaningful to you, it's lu.ma/restorative. That is where you can go and buy tickets. Now, are there replays available, Faith? I know probably showing up live is best, but
yeah, replays will be available. Yes.
Okay. Replays and whatever
worksheets and
right.
notes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Y'all, I really hope you check this out. I really hope that you deeply consider the ways in which your workplace affects your work.
your work and your home and your quality of life outside, your drive home, and it's leaking out into all the spaces. So yeah.
We're calm now, at least in my workspace. So, fabulous. Thank you, Faith, for being here and for hosting this series. And I hope that y'all get a chance to check it out. Please also, as pre-work, check out the episodes that we have already recorded. I will link them all in the show notes. You can find them all on the neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. And I think you will find them very edifying. I know that I have multiple times now because I have the memory of a guppy. So I have to watch them more than once. See? All right, y'all. Thank you for being here, and we will see you again next time.